This is the Mahindra Scorpio Z8L. It's a 6-seater 4-wheel drive wagon packed with standard features. And among those are a dual range transfer case and an automatic rear diff lock. And it's priced for just a tickle over $45,000, which is pretty good in today's competitive market. But is it any good off-road? Well, that's what we're here to find out, so stick around. There are two spec levels in the Scorpio lineup, the Z8 and the Z8L, and that's the one we're testing today. Standard features in the Z8L include this 8-inch multimedia touchscreen, and that has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. According to the specifications, there is wireless connectivity for both of those systems, but I couldn't get CarPlay working for my phone, wireless at least anyway. Otherwise, there is a 12-speaker Sony system, dual zone climate control, and a whole bunch of other stuff that is pretty good for a vehicle at this price point. But for even more details, as always, make sure you read my full written review at the CarsGuide website. That's carsguide.com.au. In terms of looks, the Scorpio has that kind of inoffensive generic SUV appearance, which is fine. It has that longish bonnet, side steps, roof rails, a sunroof, and those 18-inch alloy wheels. It's a pretty tidy looking package. Exterior paint choices include Napoli Black, which is on our test vehicle, as well as some curiously named options like Red Rage and Deep Forest. At first, the interior of the Mahindra does seem quite impressive, with the tan leather on the dash and the seats. It all seems quite neat and tidy, but you look a little bit deeper though, and that's where you realise there are some quite considerable flaws, including the lack of storage space throughout the cabin. I mean, you've only got one cup holder here. There aren't a lot of other options. It's a real shallow glove box. You do get a couple of USB ports, but not a lot in terms of a modern vehicle. And also, it's not a deal breaker for me, but there are expanses of hard plastic everywhere. The second row seats are set up one on each outboard side of the vehicle, and then at the back there are another two seats, but that's in a bench style. Obviously, in the grand tradition of 4-wheel drive wagons, as you move further towards the back of the car, space shrinks and the comfort shrinks, and you also don't get a lot in terms of amenities, USB ports or cup holders or that sort of thing. And as for rear cargo area, well, as you can see, when this back row is in use, there is not a lot of space. All I've got here is a first aid kit and an air compressor, and that pretty much uses up any of the space available back here. Another bad thing about the cargo area is if you do decide to fold this back row down, it does not stow away flat. It eats up a lot of space, so there's that. I'd be inclined to take it out if you were going to use it as a touring vehicle of note. I would get rid of this seat, at least when you're going on longer trips and that sort of thing, just to give yourself a bit more space at the back. This Mahindra has a 2.2 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine, and that produces 129 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. It also has a 6-speed automatic transmission, part-time 4-wheel drive, a low-range transfer case, and a rear diff lock that is automatic. The Scorpio feels pretty good on road, and it does pretty well on fast dirt tracks, but it starts to feel a whole lot more comfortable and a whole lot more capable when you're doing low range 4-wheel driving. Low range gearing is pretty decent. It's not the best around, and it can be a little lackluster at times, but otherwise it's okay. Hill descent control is not so good. I have been on some steep downhills here, and the Mahindra has tended to run away a tiny bit, getting up to sort of 5-6 kilometers an hour, and that's not ideal when you want to maintain safe control down the hill. The off-road driving terrain modes in the Mahindra include mud and snow and ruts and those sorts of things, and they seem to work pretty seamlessly, although we haven't had much of a variety of terrain to tackle here today. It's pretty dry. But having said that, the low range gearing is good, and that automatic rear diff lock, although a little bit clunky in operation, is certainly effective. It's proven that today. But you really have to drive the Scorpio with extreme care, because it does feel very low. That ground clearance is a listed 227 mil. It just requires the utmost concentration, which is fine, because if you're going slow and you're concentrating, you're driving safely, but geez, it feels really low at times. And although we have done all of our usual set pieces and challenges, it has really required laser focus on my part. And also when you're driving, you have to be mindful of the fact that that AdBlue tank is right at the back, quite exposed, doesn't have a whole lot of protection. It's right near that underslung spare steel wheel, and that's really vulnerable to knocks. We manage not to, but it takes very considered driving. You just have to be aware of that. That does seem quite exposed at the back there. And when it comes to difficult technical four-wheel driving like this, it always exposes any flaws or any issues in a vehicle. And as I mentioned, in this Mahindra, ground clearance is a bit of an issue. The tyres aren't ideal. While they are dubbed all-season tyres, they're not up to the job when it comes to this sort of stuff. And that rear diff lock, although it kicks in when needed, you do need to keep the boot in, keep the throttle on, and it does tend to engage and disengage with a certain amount of abruptness, which is not ideal if you're climbing a slope and it's disengaging and engaging as it sees fit. Dropping tyre pressures is the best thing to do when you're low range four-wheel driving, but the problem is when you've got a vehicle that starts with low ground clearance and you take some air out of the tyres, you're dropping that vehicle down again by increments, sure, but it all makes a difference when every millimetre counts when you're tackling rock steps and anything of a severe nature. So ground clearance is somewhat compromised in the Scorpio, but also, probably more importantly, it has very shallow approach, departure and ramp over angles, and that's something that really has to inform your driving. You have to drive to within this vehicle's limits. And while the Scorpio has done reasonably well at our four-wheel driving challenges, it has to be remembered that if you are considering this vehicle as a tourer, it has a payload of 510 kilograms and towing capacities of 750 kilograms, that's unbraked, and 2,500 kilograms, and that's braked. Official fuel consumption for the Mahindra Scorpio Z8L is listed as 7.2 litres per 100 kilometres. On this test, we've recorded an actual fuel consumption from pump to pump of 9.6 litres per 100 kilometres. Now, on a full tank, this has a 57 litre fuel tank, so not a massive fuel capacity. But on that full tank, you could expect to get from that real figure a driving range of about 593 kilometres. The Mahindra Scorpio does not have an ANCAP safety rating because it has not been tested. On board it has 6 airbags, electronic stability control, front and rear parking sensors and a tyre pressure monitoring system. So really it doesn't have a lot of driver assist safety tech, and if you are considering the Mahindra Scorpio as your family vehicle, as an everyday driver, then that's something you have to take into serious consideration. As always, for even more details on this vehicle, make sure you read my full written review at CarsGuide.com.au. The Mahindra Scorpio is covered by a 7-year, 150,000 kilometre warranty. Service intervals are set at every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, but no pricing details were available when we filmed this review. The Scorpio Z8L represents a step in the right direction for Mahindra. This four-wheel drive wagon is nice enough to drive on-road, and it's also reasonably capable off-road as long as you drive well within its limits. But it has to be said, this vehicle does lack a lot in terms of driver assist safety tech, and if you are looking at the Scorpio as a potential touring vehicle or as a family vehicle, that must be a crucial factor in your purchasing decision. However, it is still a pretty appealing value for money option. But what do you reckon? Have your say in the comments section below. And as always, for even more details on this vehicle, make sure you read my full written review at carsguide.com.au.